This program was brought to you by A.J. Longo and Associates.
Good evening, I'm Joe Carbonetta, and from the Pasadena Media Center, this is Arroyo Live. Our program is produced by Pasadena Media to help enrich our community through informative and meaningful conversation. Remember, you can share your comments with us anytime at arroyolive@pasadenamedia.org. This year, Pasadena Media is celebrating 38 years serving the community of Pasadena, providing municipal and public programming. Amid continued concern about the spread of the more highly infectious Omicron variant of the COVID-19 pandemic, and facing new concerns about a new and possibly even more infectious subvariant, currently known only as BA2, Pasadena begins its annual Black History Month celebration. Created to recognize the achievements and contributions of Black Americans and their central role in our nation's history, the celebration features community events and activities throughout the month and is traditionally kicked off by one of the largest parades in Southern California. For the second year in a row, however, the Black History Parade has been canceled due to those continuing concerns over Omicron infection and hospitalization rates. The cancellation comes despite the fact that events such as the annual Rose Parade and the Rose Bowl football game, also held within the city, went ahead as previously scheduled. Tonight, I talk with some of the people who work so hard to make Pasadena's annual celebration a success, as we begin the first of a special two-part presentation on the Black History Parade and Black History Month. Please join me for tonight's edition of Arroyo Live. I'm joined by Pasadena's Interim Assistant City Manager, Brenda Harvey-Williams. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
I'd like to begin by asking you to tell us just a little bit about what it means to be the Interim Assistant City Manager in the city of Pasadena.
Well, for starters, the technical title is Acting Assistant City Manager, but that's neither here nor there. But we had a number of people retire towards the end of last year, one of whom was Assistant City Manager Julie Gutierrez. So I have the privilege of being one of three people who will be rotating and serving into this position until a permanent city manager is hired. And then that city manager will hire her or his own assistant city manager. So for now, I'm just holding tight, trying to keep the organization moving. I have a number of departments that report to me, and I'm just enjoying my time working with the interim city manager, Cynthia Kurtz.
And no doubt there's an awful lot of work involved in the daily operations of such a large city. In addition to that, we have begun Black History Month, and with that comes a month-long celebration that includes activities and various other goings-on around the city, not the least of which was the Black History Parade, which has unfortunately once again been canceled due to concerns over the COVID pandemic. Is that correct?
That's correct, Joe. When the Black History Month committee looked at what was going on in terms of the Omicron variant and the number of cases that were happening in Pasadena, and you add in that a disproportionately high amount of African Americans were and are still getting COVID, the Black History Month committee made a joint decision to not have the parade this year.
Well, before I go any further, I have read about some mumblings of possibly not so much a cancellation as maybe simply a postponement, that the parade might be moved to later on in the year. Is there any possibility that that might actually come to fruition?
Well, we're going to see about that. Actually, tomorrow night, the Black History Month Committee is meeting, and that's the topic on the agenda. Do we want to try to stage a parade in June, sometime around Juneteenth, or do we just want to wait until next year and come back strong in 2023?
So I'd like to ask you now about your involvement with the Black History Parade. How long have you been involved with it? And equally interesting, how did you get involved with the parade?
Well, I have two distinct answers to that question. I've been involved with the parade probably for about 15 years, mostly as a participant. I would be in one of the community groups that would march or walk in the parade every year. And then in 2018, I became the director of the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Department. And that is the department in the city which stages the parade in conjunction with the Black History Month Committee, which is made up of city staff and community members. So the 2019 parade was really my first one where it was all in terms of all of the work done in the background leading up to the parade. So that's why I say I have two answers. So technically, since 2019, I've been involved in the planning of it. But as a participant, that dates back probably about 15 years. And it was always a blast being in the parade, I must add.
Well, how many years old is the parade itself?
So this year, 2022, would have been the 40th anniversary of the parade, which is why it was doubly disappointing that we had to cancel or postpone it, because we were really wanted to go big for the 40th. And so even if we aren't able to have the parade this year, we still might say that 2023 will be the 40th parade.
Interesting that you mentioned that it would have been the 40th year. How was it for you when you first discovered the Black History Parade?
Well, it was, for me, a lot of fun. I had, even prior to the 15 years in which I was in the parade, I had been coming to the parade just as a Pasadena resident and a Pasadena city employee. So it was, it's an amazing event. We like to say that we are the longest running Black History Parade in Southern California. So you just don't find this parade any and everywhere where a community will come together and celebrate Black history in the form of a parade. So it's fun. It's kind of like a family reunion. You get to see people you haven't seen maybe since the last parade or even longer. It brings together so many different community organizations.
It being the 40th year that the parade has occurred, certainly there must have been changes and evolution over the course of the parade. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I think it's kind of ebbed and flowed in terms of the size of the parade. The length of the parade has been about the same, but through the years, the number of entries has grown. And every year has a little bit of a different flavor depending on who the grand marshals are. There's usually a youth grand marshal, a community grand marshal, and a celebrity grand marshal. So it's been great to see how those changes have occurred over the years. And some years along the way, there haven't been as many people along the parade route. But overall, it's been well attended. The other change is after the parade, there's the festival, which takes place at Robinson Park. And that's, again, part of the homecoming, because everybody who was stretched along the parade gets to come together at the festival. There's food and games and children's activities. And over the years, that changes a bit in terms of size and depending on what entertainment we have. So usually there's a nice musical group performing, and so that's it changes a little bit, but it changes, but it doesn't, is I think what I'm trying to say.
Okay, well, going back to your 15-year involvement, favorite moments, do you have a few that you could share with us?
Sure. I can tell you that in 2020, probably one of my favorite moments, which is a little off the wall, but that year our Grand Marshal was Wendy Raquel Robinson, the actress, and she's also a Pasadena resident. So she was riding, we had her riding in a lovely convertible car. And I had the pleasure of kind of being her escort. I met her at the parking lot when she came, and I escorted her to the breakfast. And when it was time to put her in her car and send her down the parade route, she said to me, "Oh, you're coming with me, aren't you?" So I was like, "Well, that really wasn't the plan." She's like, "Oh, yes, you're coming with me." So I had the opportunity to ride down the parade route in her car and experience the parade attendees' excitement at seeing her. So for a moment, I could pretend that they were really yelling and screaming and wanted my autograph. Okay, but it wasn't me. But it was just a lot of fun to see the way people reacted to her and kind of just get the inside of star treatment.
But if I have my facts correct, you've also been a participant in the parade as an honoree. Is that correct?
I actually haven't been an honoree. I've, like I said, I've been in it with another group, but as a sole honoree myself, no, I haven't.
Perhaps a moment that is of the greatest magnitude in terms of your experiences with the parade, something that really stands out in your mind?
I would say a couple. One is we have the pleasure of also having, I didn't mention, we have politicians who are in the parade. So it's also great that, and one that just kind of stands to mind is that our state senator, Anthony Portantino, our assembly member, Chris Holden, that they take the time to come and be in the parade. So that stands out in my mind. Another one is when we've had the opportunity to have local talent that has become famous, who have become famous, to perform at the festival. So those are two of the big ones. And also when we've had some athletes who've gone on and become famous, but they're Pasadena residents. Those are the big things to me, that it's just the fact that people have their roots in Pasadena, and a lot of people come through here. And as we all know, Pasadena is a great city and become famous. And it's just great that they'll all turn around and come back home and be in the parade and meet and greet everyone.
A moment ago, we were talking about the possibility that the parade might not be so much canceled as merely postponed. And you mentioned that there are some potential ideas for dates that are being thrown around, one of which would coincide with the Juneteenth celebration. I'm wondering if you could tell us about the significance of Juneteenth and tying it in with the Black History Parade.
Well, Juneteenth which is now a federal holiday, which was made a federal holiday just last year, it's June 19th. It signifies, to go back in the history of it, was when the Civil War ended and Lincoln freed the slaves, nobody told Texas, or Texas didn't free their slaves. So it was a number of years later until word got to Texas and the slaves were freed in Texas. And that particular day that they celebrate honoring that is June 19th. So that's the historical context for Juneteenth. So in Pasadena, we've always, I didn't say always, but for many years, we have had a Juneteenth celebration at the Jackie Robinson Community Center. So part of the reason why that date is being bantered about, if we were going to reschedule the parade, is because it's another significant date in African American history. And I think the other reason why is the little bit we know about COVID, it seems to die down in the summertime. So, we're going to hope and pray that this is our last surge or bout with COVID, but if it does go away in the warmer months, that would be an ideal time to try to bring people together again.
Well, and speaking of bringing people together again, and so far we've talked about a bit of the history of the parade, and I would actually like to go a little bit deeper with the origins of the parade, but I'm wondering what effect it has on the community. What have you seen in terms of the community response, community involvement, community awareness of the Black History Parade?
Well, it's an opportunity for, again, we advertise it, and it's amazing to see our residents line the streets of all ages. I think parents bring their children to for the opportunity for them to see the groups that are in the parade. It's always beautiful to see our older residents who come out to either see their friends or just to, again, continue to celebrate the month. It's amazing to just bring together so many cross sections of our community, primarily African Americans, but then it's always wonderful to see all of our other brothers and sisters who come out and support us and also participate in the parade. And I didn't mention the high schools. We usually have 2 or 3 of our local high school bands who participate, the bands and the color guard and everything that goes with the band, and the drill teams and the flags. And but it's good for those high school students to learn about Black history. You don't always learn that in school.
Well, I'd also like to ask a little bit more about yourself, in keeping with the celebration, because you are an inspiration to people all across the city and even beyond. And I'm wondering how you came to be involved in government and politics.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Joe, this story starts when I was in the summer in between 3rd and 4th grade.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so that summer was, so I'm going to date myself here, the Watergate hearings. And so the Watergate hearings were on TV, and I started watching them, and there was a very powerful African-American woman who was questioning some of the witnesses, and it was Barbara Jordan, who at that time was a congresswoman from Texas, and she was the first Black elected to Congress from the Deep South in many, many years. So Barbara Jordan, and she had this deep billowing voice, and she was questioning the witnesses and just had such authority. And it just really, it just had an impact on me to see her doing that in that context. And I've always was kind of a little wonky, nerdy kid and loved the news. So watching the Watergate hearings wasn't strange for me. Fast forward, went to college, majored in economics, which you can't really get a job with unless you go on to more schooling. And so I learned about, there were so many things I didn't want to do. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do in college, but I learned about public policy. And then I found out that Barbara Jordan was a professor at the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas. So that's where I decided I wanted to go to school. So I ended up going to school there, got my master's degree in public affairs, and got an internship, guess where? Here with the city of Pasadena. And that was over 30 years ago. And I'm still here. So that's how I got my start. But starting my job here in Pasadena, I started as an intern and have worked my way up. But I've loved every minute of it because I call Pasadena a small city with a big attitude, meaning, our numbers aren't that large, but you can't tell us we're not the city of Los Angeles in importance. We have the Rose Bowl and the Rose Parade and JPL and all of these other worldwide known things. So it's been a great place to work all these years, and I've never wanted to go anywhere else because there's just so many opportunities here in Pasadena. But that's how I got my start.
How important would you say it is to get today's youth involved or at least interested in city or local governments And is there a particular importance for African Americans?
Yes, yes, absolutely, yes. Because you've got to have a seat at the table in order to change things. And I think that diversity is extremely important. We always need to have a diversity of ideas, be it from diversity of age, ethnicity, race, gender identity. When we all have a seat at the table, we can improve things for everyone and not just have one dominant culture imposing their views on others. So I try to encourage young people as much as I can. I think one of the good things that came out of the awakening from the George Floyd murder was that a lot more people, especially African Americans, got interested and started paying attention. We've got to have a seat at the table. We've got to be where the decisions are made. And this is where the decisions are made. So it's extremely important that we are willing to dig our feet in, start at the bottom, so to speak, work your way up so that you can become one who is sitting at the table making the decisions. It's extremely important.
Well, and in building on that notion of having a seat at the table, can you give us your thoughts and impressions on President Biden's recent reassertion of his intention to nominate an African American woman to the Supreme Court?
My opinion is it's a great thing. Again, diversity of opinions. I heard a statistic this morning, and I don't have the numbers right, but out of 158, something like that, Supreme Court justices, 151 have been white men. So that's not good. And for as long as the Supreme Court has been seated, let's look at some of the rules or laws that they upheld before they started to get them right. For years, they upheld segregation. For years, they upheld, they didn't allow women to vote. So it wasn't until, the 50s where we had a few liberal judges who were able to start changing things. But now that we have some diversity, it's important to continue to have diversity. We have seen Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We have seen the two current now 3 current female justices, but we've not yet had the opportunity to have an African-American woman. We've had 2 men, but it's now, I think it's a great thing. And I find it interesting that people are criticizing him for that. But when you, again, go back and look at recent history, we find other presidents who have said, and it was Ronald Reagan who said he was going to appoint a woman. Nobody yelled and screamed when he did that. So, there's always going to be something to complain about. And unfortunately, our country is very divided at this point, but maybe I'm a little biased, but I think it's a great thing. And if you look at the women whose names are being bantered about, I was looking at all of their credentials and amazingly qualified.
And it's of note that you say that because I have read that some of the arguments for or against, I should say, perhaps President Biden's, again, his reassertion to nominate an African-American woman is that there are those who believe it's being exclusionary because he's basically saying, I'm only considering women of color for candidacy here. And they are arguing that what if there are perhaps better qualified individuals? But it sounds from everything I've read and what you're saying that the candidates he's considering are very, very highly qualified and probably equally qualified to any other potential candidates. Would you not agree?
I would agree. 3 of the top 4, or 3 of the 4 being listed, have, double Ivy League backgrounds. I don't think you can get better than that. I think 3 of them, either undergrad or law school, went to Yale. Maybe one had a Princeton and a Harvard in there. that's the standard by which we call those our best universities.
Brenda, I was wondering if there are any role models or mentors that you've had along the way that have helped you along or motivated you in your career endeavors.
There have been. Since I've been here with the city of Pasadena, I've had some great bosses, and I would like to give a shout out to a couple of them, kind of in chronological order. When I was very early in my career as an analyst, there was an auditor by the name of John Ostrowski. And from John, I learned the importance of details and getting your facts straight. John used to say that if there's a typo in your work, why should people believe your analysis? So from him, I learned to be very detail oriented. And now when I read other people's work and I proofread it, I use a red pen, and it annoys a lot of people. But that's the way I was taught. Sorry. I had another supervisor, a man by the name of Norman Carter, who was the budget administrator, actually. And what he taught me was the importance of really caring for people and making sure that you look after the people that you work with and you treat them with dignity and respect, because everybody's entitled to that, even if they're don't seem worthy of it. Another role model who I had is actually, I have the pleasure of working for her again. I mentioned her, Cynthia Kurtz, who's now the interim city manager, but she was city manager up until 2008. But prior to that, she was the public works director, and I had the opportunity to work for her. And what I learned from Cynthia, and I'm so enjoying working with her again, is the importance of being prepared. She studied very hard and she got all her facts straight. And that's something I've also tried to do. And even now, having the opportunity to work for her again, I've learned a couple more things from her in the last month or so. So those are some of the big ones. And then I'll also say another thing is Leadership Pasadena. I am a 2014 Leadership Pasadena graduate, so shout out to Leadership Pasadena. But one of the important things I learned there is if you want to be a leader, people should want to follow you. Not to mean that everybody has to like you, but you have to be authentic and honest and congruent. Your head and your heart have to be in alignment. And nobody likes a phony.
If I could go back to talking about the youth for just a moment, actually in the final moments that we have here, I was wondering if you could give any advice to youth that were interested or even considering looking into city government as a possible career path. What would you say to them?
I would say to them, number one, be aware of current events. It's important to know what's going on in your world. I like to start each day, well, now on my phone reading the news, but prior to that, it's important to know what's going on in your community, because what gets printed in our local paper or what gets posted on our local internet newspaper will 9 times out of 10 be a topic of discussion by the city council. So know what people's concerns are, know about your world, know what's wrong with it, what you want to change about it, know what's right about it that you want to make sure stays right about it. But you just have to know what's going on in your world and stay away from opinions on social media. I'm talking cold, hard facts are important. I'm a much bigger fan of NPR than and believe that's a good news source than I guess I'm trying to say stay away from Facebook, which the young people do, but Twitter, TikTok, there's so much misinformation out there. It's important to think critically for yourself. Find the facts, think about it, make sure it makes sense. Don't just follow or listen to what other people say or follow them because somebody said it and they were really cool or something.
And what is your next step after acting assistant city manager?
Well, I'm just going to be in this role for 3 months and then someone else is going to rotate into it. So after that, I will return to my real job, which is the director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services. And I do also look forward to returning to that. I miss all of the programming that we do over there. So I do look forward to returning to that.
Well, for now, you are still the acting assistant city manager, and we thank you very much, Ms. Brenda Harvey-Williams, for joining us this afternoon. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, and we really appreciate all of your hard work for us here in this community.
I've enjoyed myself as well, so thank you.
Joining me now is Black History Parade MC Roland Bynum. Thank you for being here with us this evening. And how are you tonight?
Very good, Joe. Just got out of teaching at Elliott Middle School, drove all the way from Pasadena to home, but I'm good.
Thank you so much for being with us this evening, despite your very busy schedule. I would like to ask you at this moment to take a little time to tell our viewers at home a little bit more about yourself and your distinguished career.
I've been in radio since 1963. My beginning began the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And the reason is I was a student at Los Angeles City Broadcasting Department. And I was in class when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and the accused assassin was Lee Harvey Oswald. And I was in the Marine Corps with Lee Harvey Oswald. And I had a fellow student, he was 18, I was 22, named Elliot Mintz, M-I-N-T-Z. And Elliot was 18, I was 22, and he knew a story when he heard it right then and there. And he interviewed me in the broadcast department. And that interview went to one of the local news stations. I heard it and I knew right away that this was my calling. What I didn't know for 50 years is that that interview was heard in 70 cities throughout the United States. It was the first interview about Lee Harvey Oswald, and before his wife and before his mother was interviewed. Elliot Mintz later went on to become the publicist, a very famous publicist and a radio personality in the greater Los Angeles area. And Paris Hilton was one of his clients, and John Lennon and Yoko Ono were his clients. And just a very well-known and just a gifted gentleman. So that's how it all began for me. And from there, I worked, my first commercial radio job was in Montgomery, Alabama, 1966. And WCHB, which was the first Black-owned, built from the ground-up radio station in Inkster, Michigan, where I was a foster youth and a teenager. And I worked there. And then I got called to come to KGFJ Los Angeles in 1967, a few minutes ago.
But as you mentioned at the top, in addition to your very storied career in broadcasting, you're also a teacher.
That is correct. I began teaching in 1995 as a challenged by one of my buddies that I grew up with, Roger Trammell, who also was a teacher in the greater Los Angeles Unified School District. And one day he had come to me and said, Roland, you should teach. And I said, I'm not a teacher. I'm a radio personality. I'm in the entertainment industry, Joe. And he said, no, you should teach. I said, why should I teach? And he told me, Roland, you have a wealth of experience that you can pass on to our young people. You're an African-American, you're a minority, and you're a male. And it would make a difference for a lot of our young people. And I meditated on it, thought about it, and said, why not? I'll try it out. I took the CBEST, failed it, took it again, passed it after some tutoring. And I sat on my CBEST for a couple of years in it. And with his pushing me and my sister, Sharon, I said, Roland, you should go teach. And so I put in an application at the Pasadena Unified School District, and 2 weeks later, they called me, April of 1995. And I landed at Norma Coombs. Well, actually, it was Pasadena Alternative, and it was Norma Coombs, who was the principal, who unfortunately transitioned 5 months later. And they named the school after. And I did it for a couple of years, and then I left that and became a businessman in my own telemarketing company with my family. In 2001, I came back to teaching. The calling just kept saying, Roland, come back, come back. And I did. And in 2001, 2 days before 9/11, I landed at John Muir High School for 6 weeks. And that lasted for 17 years. So I retired in 2018. And they kept calling me, so I'm a guest teacher. I don't call myself a substitute. and currently at Elliott for the entire year, supporting the students and the staff there.
If you had to choose amongst all of the things that you've done, what is the most rewarding aspect of your?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. That's a good one because I enjoy teaching, but I believe it's radio, my first calling, and it allows me to reach a larger audience. The school allows me to reach an intimate, smaller audience, but I get a opportunity to reach a greater audience through radio. Just something I really enjoyed. It has been my life, calling for 58 years. So 59 this year.
And well, that's an amazing career in and of itself. And in addition to all of that, which you've already talked about, and tying in with reaching out to greater audiences, you are also the MC for the Black History Parade. Yes.
And I moved from LA to Pasadena in 1988, and Carolyn Jones and Tori McCoy asked me to join them in the publicity department for the Black History Parade. That was my initial beginning with the Black History Parade in 1988. And a couple of years later, I started announcing. They asked me to announce the games, and with great joy in my heart, I said, absolutely. Wow, what a wonderful opportunity to be a part of this historic event here in Pasadena.
Well, so now I have to ask if you could take a little bit of time to tell us about your experiences and involvement with the parade. What is it like as a member of the crew? You get there early in the morning and begin the setup process, and tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I do work on Saturdays, and so I'm up at 3:00. And yes, I'm up at 3:00 on Saturday mornings. Prior to that, when I lived in Pasadena, of course, I'd get up at 5, and I had to be on air at 6. And so actually it starts long before the parade is in action. We meet with the team. They present us with the script. We get a chance to see who's there. What a wonderful community parade, because I would say 90% of the people in the Black History Parade are from the community. And we get a chance to see our family members, the Pasadena family, strut and do their thing. And so I get up and I read the script. I'm prepared with the script. I meet the crew. The crew sets me up. And the Pasadena cable, the television, has been just a wonderful crew. They Kevin and his crew, they know exactly what they're doing. They've been doing it for a number of years, Joe. And they make it easy for me. They make it so easy. It's a joy. When they say, we got another one coming, I say, let's do it. And that team that they have here really makes it for a wonderful event. Not only that, but post the Black History Parade, I get a chance to view it. They give me a video of it, and I get a chance to critique myself and critique my co-host, and we get a chance to do that. So we try to make it even a more splendid opportunity for the upcoming year. So it's a team effort.
Well, you just mentioned not only critiquing yourself, but some of your co-hosts as well. Can you tell us what it's like to work with some of these co-hosts?
Beautiful ladies, Brenda, who was my co-host in the very beginning, and then I have the Smile Lady and Dixie Poynton, and these ladies are just a bundle of joy to be with. I mean, professional, and they know the community. That's another good thing. They know the community extremely well. When someone comes down that line and they're shouting out, and they know them personally, and that makes a big difference, as opposed to just having to read a script, but they know the people. And so that makes it easier for me. It makes it a lot of fun. And we just have a ball presenting the entries into the Black History Parade. It's just a joy. I look forward to it every year.
Well, as a Pasadena resident yourself, you are sometimes referred to as one of the local celebrities. And so now I have to mention yet another thing that you have under your belt. You've also recently written a book. Is that correct?
I have.
You can now add author to the list of things that you have accomplished. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the book, your experience as an author. And I know this could take some time as well, but I'm sure that our viewers at home, and I certainly would love to hear about this.
I hadn't thought about it, but here is the book. The book is called God Shot, Um, Joe, this book started a long time ago, started in 1989. Actually, what happened is, as I told my story as a foster youth, I grew up as a foster youth. I was taken out of my mother's arms, Joe, me and my brother Tyrone. I was 11 months. Tyrone was 2 years old. My mother was 16. And as a result, I was placed into an institution called the Children's Aid Society in Detroit, Michigan. And the book details that journey all the way up until I'm 27 years old, 1968, Mother's Day weekend, and I discovered, and I never use the word found. There's a difference between finding something and discovering something. I tell my students, when you look it up, you'll find out that that there's a tremendous difference in the two. I discovered my family, and I found out my mother had 9, well, I didn't know Tyrone. I had 9 other children besides myself.
These are
I also
came later, though.
I beg your pardon?
These are siblings that came afterward.
Well, actually, I had an older sister. God rest her, she transitioned about a year and a half ago, and my brother Tyrone, and I'm the third one out of 10. And when I met my family, there was something also that really impacted me. Being a radio personality in 1968, I was on my way to Charlotte, North Carolina to become a program director of WGIB in Charlotte, Joe. And my wife, we had our first child, said, and she knew what my fosterism, said, on the way to Charlotte, let's stop in Detroit and see if you can find your family. And I said, and this is detailed in the book, I said, yeah, what would the chances be that I would find them? No way, but I did it anyway. And a month prior to that, I was at a Marvin Gaye concert, Joe, and there was a group in there that I went over to, and I introduced to myself to this group, very famous Motown group. And a month later, I discovered that this man that I had met a month prior was my uncle. I didn't know that. And that is Smokey Robinson. Smokey Robinson is my mother's only brother and younger brother. And of course, later on, I discovered that my brother Tyrone and my uncle Smokey, my brother actually, because my family adopted him when he was 10, when my grandmother Flossie died. They're a week of difference in their age, and I'm 11 months younger than my uncle. So, and Joe, it was Mother's Day weekend, May 10th, 1968, when I discovered my family and discovered that a guy who I've been playing music with for over the years on the radio was my uncle. So this book details that journey. It's called Godshots, Life is a Journey, but it's nothing without God. Yeah.
You know, I have to say, I'm almost at a loss for words now, because my very next question was going to be, when you discovered your biological family, I was wondering if any of them had also gravitated toward entertainment, but you've already answered that question. So you have some very, very amazing connections, family and entertainment wise. But is that the inspiration for the book itself? I mean, what really inspired you to write this book?
I've been an open book. I'm a recovering person, and many people know that. I walked the streets. I was homeless for about 8 years on drugs. I'm not ashamed to say that. I think by telling it, that if anybody is watching this and if they're struggling with it, that they have family members struggling with it, let it be known that you can overcome and do something very special with your life. And I'm not afraid to say that. And it's detailed in my book. I've also talked about it on the radio. And people know that is true. And it's not, something uncommon in our community. And as I told my story, people began to tell me, you need to write a book, Joe. And come on, I had no idea to write a book. And in 2005, it came upon me that, well, I'll try, and I began to write. But I discovered that it was so much more that I needed to know. And God, and I say this with all intent, slowed me down. And as I slowed down, I was also going to college and working on, I got 2 more master's degrees when I enrolled at John Muir High School. I say that honestly. I got, when I went back to school, I got my teacher's credentials. And while doing so, I got a master's, my second master's. My first is in telecommunications, in education, administration, and leadership. And then I went back to school and got another master's at Point Loma Nazarene University in counseling. So that slowed down the book process. And then I revisited it and I continued to write. And then I have 13 children, Joe.
13?
I have 13 children. And in the book, if you may, let me read this. On the back of the book, it says, I had this quiet and personal conversation with God as I closed my eyes, not knowing how to pray. I just played basketball and I was going through a field and I was a little exhausted and I sat down and I laid down. And I said, and I looked up to the sky and I said, God, please let me find a family that is my own, because living with the Reeds, which were my foster parents, is horrible. Also, I want to live a long life. Right now, I'm 81. I paused and then made one more appeal. I would like to have a big family of my own. I was 14 years old when I wrote that. And so far, all of it has come true.
Now that we have discussed all of these things that you have accomplished, career-wise, family-wise, overcoming some hurdles along the way, and I congratulate you for being able to do that. The next obvious question is, where does all the energy come from?
I've always had a lot of energy. I've always been that way. I said when I was young, I never wanted to retire. So far, I really haven't permanently retired. I've observed people who have lived long lives. I know that they read, they write, they're engaging. I want to live a long life. I want to be able to contribute as long as I can, as long as I live. When I was in that garage and I asked God to take this out of this sickness away, and I received that blessing, I made it a point that I would be an example of how to live your life in a very positive way. I just can't explain it, Joe. It's just in me. Yeah, it's just in me. Right now, I'm in Bible college, my third year. I'm also doing Bible classes, so 3 nights a week. And that's why I told Kevin that Tuesday would be my open night because Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I'm in class. And I just love learning. I think one should be a lifelong learner, Joe. I think that's important. It's something I share with my students, and I be an example of that.
Though we are certainly not here on the show in the habit of being religious in any way, going back to what you mentioned earlier about the appeals that you made and how all of those have come to fruition, I'm reminded of a saying that the Lord helps those who help themselves.
That's right.
So you have done quite a bit on your own behalf over the years.
I guess it's just, it's just something that I try to be an example for others, for my children. I initially wrote the book for my children because I told them, you guys don't know me. You know me as Dad, but you don't know my real story. You don't know the true story. So every one of my children have the book. And I also, it says I wrote it for the yet unborn, because I believe it's important to leave a legacy. And so I do know that I have grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And one day this book they'll go to the library and this book will be in there and they'll see my name and they'll pick it up and hopefully they'll read it. I think it's important that as family, we do leave something. And so that's just one of the major reasons why I did write it, is for my children and for my grandchildren and for the yet unborn.
And you also have some photographs, archived photographs that you have brought to share with us. I'm wondering if you could take a little time to tell us about those. Let
me see. I have a picture of me graduating from high school. I worked in a barbershop, a Penny's barbershop, and it was a Muslim barbershop. George Penny and his wife were Muslims. Many people may not know this, but Elijah Muhammad had his first mosque in Detroit. It was not in Chicago. In fact, I did learn later that my father at 19 was a member of the Black Muslims, and when he was 19 years old. It just so happens I used to shine shoes in this barbershop. And one of the customers was Malcolm X. Malcolm and I both lived on William Street in Inkster, Michigan. And my clean day, the day that I walked away from all of the madness. Just happens to be May 19th, Malcolm X's birthday. So that picture of me is, my hair is conked because George used me as a model for the process hair. Like I said, I was at LA City College, the broadcasting department. And how that happened is depicted in the book equally as well. So there's a picture of me at the broadcasting department, and also a picture of me in LA City College studio with Milt Greenberger, Bob Howard. I also have a picture of me at WCHB, where I worked weekends prior to my being hired in Los Angeles in 1967 to replace a gentleman by the name of Magnificent Montague. Now, Joe, many people might remember that name or may not, but they do remember the Watts riot or revolt in 1965. That happened on my second wedding anniversary, August the 11th, 1965. And he was the man that was on KGFJ when I was in college saying, "Burn, baby, burn."
In speaking with you this evening, we have talked about a number of important dates, which, you know, in historical events, which seem to coincide with the important dates in your own life. I'm wondering if you've ever found any messages or inspiration in those coincidences.
My whole life has been, I don't know, people say you're good with dates, and I don't know where that comes from. I remember birthdays and dates. So as a teacher, that was important because one of the classes that I taught that I loved was American literature, 11th grade. And as a result of that, I was able to put dates together with events. My life has been one that has been, just so happens that coincidences, there are so many coincidences that happen in my life. And the dates that coincide with them just happens to be what my life is. I just happen to be one of those, Joe, that remember dates and events at the same time. I guess it's a gift that I've been given. And my book is quantified with those kinds of situations. And it just kind of, for instance, Joe, I was reading The Reinvention of Malcolm X. Of course, it's an autobiography, but The Reinvention of Malcolm X was a book that I wanted to read because it gave me another insight to Malcolm. And on page 100, I'm reading the book. And there it is. It's 1952. I was abruptly moved from Detroit to another home in Inkster, Michigan. And I moved on a street called Williams Street. And in the book on page 100, it also tells that Malcolm X was released from prison, 1952. He too moved on Williams Street with his brother Wilbert. So he lived on one end of the block, on one end of the street, and I lived on the other. And I always knew that when we signed his shoes that he would come to Inkster, but I did not know until I read that passage that we had that connective piece there. 1952, Williams Street. So I also have pictures of his house, Wilbert's house, in the book also.
Are there prominent chapters of specific importance that should be highlighted for the reader?
One of them is the conversation with God. I think that's important. I talk about Leon Wagner. I don't know if many people know who he is. Leon Wagner was a Major League Baseball player who grew up in the area. We used to run and catch he used to hit him over the balls over the Carver. And we ended up being good friends. Leon died in a laundromat in Los Angeles, in Leimert Park, January of 2001 or 2, or maybe 3 or 4, somewhere around there, I could recall. I'm just thinking. So let me look at the book. The book, one of the things, page 27, I talk about radio, music, and reading. Radio impacted me. I learned to read from radio, Joe. I was 4 years old, preschool. I was pre-basement. We were in the basement, and I used to listen to the radio. And just so happens, the funny paper or the comics was available, and I heard the radio. And on Sundays they would play the Marvel comics on the radio, the Green Hornet, and all of the famous now movies, but they were on the funny paper, and I would read it. And just so happens I picked up the newspaper and the funnies, and I heard the voice, and I saw the pictures, and I saw the words, and I taught myself how to read at 4 years old by listening to the radio. Well, isn't it something that as an adult I ended up being in radio and have been for 58 years?
Tell our viewers at home one more time the title of your book.
Yeah, the book is entitled God Shots. And I heard that at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting in a basement, South Central Los Angeles, 1989. I heard someone get up on the podium and said the things that happened to him were a God shot. What do you know? It impacted me. It touched me. I never forgot that term and what it meant. And so when I was beginning to write my first book, I knew exactly what the title would be. God Shots. Life is a journey, but it's nothing without God. So,
any plans to write another one now that you've got?
Yeah, I have. I'm planning this year to start the second half of my life, which is entirely different than the first half, Joe. It's my radio career, the people I met, the things that I did, my marriages, the wonderful people that I met, and the experiences that I had. And so that's the second book. And Joe, I have one more, maybe two more. My third book is, let me see here. While I was teaching, I kept a book like this. And every time I was given an idea, Joe, I put it inside of there. And that's my third book. It's what I learned. I told my students today, my third book is about what you taught me and what I learned as a teacher. And I want to pass that on to students, parents, and teachers and administrators. And so that's my third book that I have in the works. I'm only 81. I still got some time, Joe.
I'm very, very glad to hear that. Unfortunately for our program, we have run out of time.
Oh boy.
Roland Bynum, radio personality, athlete, author, the list goes on and on. Yours is clearly a life well lived and not over yet. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. Oh, and I forgot teacher. I would be remiss to not mention that. But thank you again for joining us this evening. It has been a true pleasure to speak with you. I wish we had more time.
I do too, and I wish we were doing that 40th Black History Parade in person, but we'll get them next year, and we'll have the great community to come out and be a part of it. Thank you, Joe, and thank you to the Pasadena Cable for allowing me to share my story. I really love you guys and appreciate what you do for the community. God bless.
Thank you again. And to our viewers at home, thank you for joining us. If there are topics that you would like to see addressed on this program, you can email them to arroyolive@pasadenamedia.org, and we may include them in a future broadcast. A special note, the next part in our series will feature a special guest host, Miss Pixie Boyden. Until next time, this has been Arroyo Live. I'm Joe Carbonetta. Thank you for watching, and good night.
This program was brought to you by A.J. Longo and Associates.